got theme music today, Michael.
Listen to you. Oh my goodness gracious. We got to get ready for the big game.
In the words of Brent Musburger, ladies and gentlemen, we are live, and you are looking in on Michael Martin, the lovely and talented mortgage lender here from Raleigh, North Carolina. Okay, we can stop your theme music yet. I couldn't decide which theme music to use for you because I had that or I had this intro for Michael Martin here.
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond
Or Ric Flair.
wearing, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing,
Love
living
it.
in right, jet
Absolutely love
flying,
it.
son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time
holding these gators down. I love Ric Flair. Sorry, had to. We got to give Michael the proper intro because to be the man, you got to beat the man and Michael is the man. So, welcome
gracious.
everybody to another session talking about mortgage here for we'll take about 25 minutes here if we want to. If it gets shorter, fine. If it gets longer, fine. We'll figure it out and figure out what we got to do. Once again, welcome everybody. I'm Brian Pate. This is Michael Martin, the king of all kings when it comes to mortgage lending. Michael, give us your background, give us your contact information so we can have that in there for him.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. I have been a mortgage lender for a little over 20 years here in the Raleigh area, and love what I do. Love helping people. Love working and building relationships with people like you, Brian, and get to work with great clients. But my website is yournclender.com, and I have just started recording a podcast, so I'll at least promote that briefly. We don't have it actually published yet, but it's getting ready to get out there very soon. It is called Beyond the Closing Table, and I interview real estate agents, mortgage lenders, and business owners to share their wisdom. We talk about their failures and what they've learned from those to overcome and become successful.
That sounds awesome, man. We talk about a lot of successes, but we forget the learning takes place in the failures, not necessarily the successes. So I love that idea. Love the fact that you're going to do that. So Michael, we're going to get right into it today. Mortgage rates still pushing upwards a little bit. We're on just a little bit over a 7 handle yesterday. Not sure what we'll see coming up today, but yesterday's average was national average just above a 7. So I'm going to ask you the magic question that's on everybody's minds today. The Fed lowered rates. They lowered rates in September by 50 basis points, or for those of you that want to speak English, half a percent. And then again, just last week, they lowered it another 25 basis points. That's 0.75% down from the Fed in the last 35 days. Michael, why is my mortgage rate not going down? Why are these buyers that are on the fence not seeing 6.25%, 6.5%, 6%? Why are they not seeing that yet?
You got me. I have no clue. No. The main thing is that's happened, right, is kind of important to explain this. I think so many people, and being in this business for so long, the first few years, I probably had no clue what actually made interest rates go up or down. But then you start to become a student and you learn from a lot of different guys out there, and there's incredible resources to learn from. You and I, of course, have listened to a guy named Barry Habib for a long time. Barry's caught a lot of slack over the last couple of years for some bad predictions last year. But you can't be right 100% of the time. That being said, there's a lot of resources and you can find out there. But the main thing that's happened, right, is the Fed is lowered the Fed funds rate. And so many people confuse the Fed funds rate with mortgage rates, and they literally are not the same at all. Important to understand what the Fed funds rate is. The Fed funds rate is the rate at which banks lend each other money overnight. Now, why would they do that? So if Bank of America has a bunch of withdrawals and because they have certain assets, they have to have a certain amount of cash on hand. So they will literally borrow money from Wells Fargo, or any other bank can borrow from banks. They borrow from each other, but the government sets that interest rate in which they borrow money. They're literally, I don't know of a shorter term rate than the Fed funds rate, right? When you think of a mortgage, in many cases, you're talking about a 30-year rate or a 15-year rate, or really anything in between. But the Fed funds rate is the rate at which now it is an annual rate. Important to understand that, right? You're still annualizing that when you borrow overnight. So you're not being charged 5.5% from one day to the next, right? It's still an annual rate, but you divide that by the days. And so what does that affect? What does the Fed funds rate affect? So probably the most direct thing that it affects is home equity lines, because home equity lines are attached to something called prime rate. Now, prime rate is also different than Fed funds rate. However, it's really simple to calculate. Whatever the Fed funds rate is, then you literally add 3 points to that, and that is prime rate. And so equity lines where it will have either a prime plus, right? It might be prime +1, prime +2, and prime -1. And so your equity lines. So if you have an equity line and you've got a balance on it, you will have noticed, if you haven't increased the balance, your payment has actually gone down over the last, literally 6-7 weeks.
Right.
And that's because of the 3/4 of a point in total. Your payment will have gone down because of that. So that's helpful to us, right? If you have an equity line. Other things that are affected by the Fed funds rate or prime rate, because prime rate is directly affected that, is specifically are things like credit cards or car loans. Shorter term loans, not overnight loans, but other types of loans. And so it's important to know that that's affecting all those things, right? So that money is getting cheaper, which causes people to spend more. Now, probably not going to go out and just spend a bunch more money because the rates dropped 3/4 of a point. But as they get lower and lower, people will spend more. Right? That's the whole reason that the Fed raised rates to begin with, was to slow down spending, because spending was getting out of hand. Inflation was obviously getting out of hand. Right? And the definition of inflation is not enough money. I'm sorry, more money chasing fewer goods.
Right.
And so you have too much money and there's fewer goods out there. That's going to naturally cause the prices to, excuse my phone right over there. That's going to cause the prices to raise. And
So,
so,
in conjunction with that, just for some statistical data, we got the government numbers from the amount of debt that people have on their credit card debt. We're talking about $1.14 trillion in credit card debt. That's trillion, folks, with a T. So a lot of people with this inflation rising. So although we've seen inflation settled, October was the first month that we saw inflation actually be up since March. I was just looking at those numbers this morning. March was the last time that inflation numbers were up, but before March, inflation numbers were 3.5%, 4% in some cases on an annualized basis. And so that's why your milk, your eggs, your groceries, your pharmaceuticals and everything was more expensive. And it all begins with the energy costs, of course, which is transporting the materials that you need for those. And so that was driving up prices. Well, a lot of people, it took some lag time for incomes to catch up with that, which meant that there were a lot of people that were borderline able to afford things, and they leveraged themselves on credit cards in order to be able to make ends meet. So that's why that lowering of the Fed rate is so important to the economics of the country, because it allows people to have a little bit more money in their pocket. Now, the problem with it is, there's a lot of people out there bragging, oh, my interest rate on my mortgage is only 2.8%. Well, that's great, but you got 30,000 in credit card debt at 22.5%. So that kind of offsets it. So where, Michael, at what point, where's the tipping point that you might take out an equity loan to pay off some credit cards, or maybe a short 5-year personal loan type thing, or a term loan of some kind? Is there a balance point when that should be done? Or, because I've always said never take a home equity loan because it's only interest only, and most people don't have the discipline to pay it back. Are there options for people that are in that situation? Maybe they can't qualify for the home loan right now, but what do we have to do to put themselves in position? What's your advice?
This is a good question, because the reality is people are drowning in credit card debt, right? If we've reached this 1.1 something trillion dollars in credit card debt, because incomes didn't go up and spending got higher, right? And that's what caused that.
Yes.
And so I'm kind of the opposite. I tell people all the time, you need to get an equity line, because you just never know when you're going to want to have access to the equity in your house. And in many cases, the times you need it most are then times you might not be able to qualify.
Right.
And so having the equity line, it costs you $0 to have a $200,000 equity line that you don't touch.
Right.
Now, You're right. It is interest only. Although you bring up a funny point to me. I used to have all these people back, we used to do interest only first mortgages, right? Back in
Hmm.
2005, 6, and 7. And then I'd have these people complain, 4 years later when I'm doing their refinance, they got their loan with somebody else, or maybe they even got it with me, and they'd be like, "This darn loan, the balance won't go down. It's an interest-only loan." I'm like, "Well, you can just pay more. Then it'll go down."
Right.
And so, if you pay more than the interest-only payment, it goes down by whatever that amount is in
Right.
excess.
Pay $100 extra a month, and guess what? It goes down by $100.
$100. That's right. So, but it's funny though, the mentality, because you're right, the discipline I think can be a challenge for people.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
when is the time to do to I mean, the first thing, let's just like kind of address, right, the Dave Ramsey elephant in the room.
Right.
Stop spending too much damn money, first of all, right? Like, you have to slow down your spending, because there is no refinancing that's going to get you out of debt. You have to pay down the debt, right? I don't know if you and I've talked about this before or not, but it drives me crazy, these commercials I hear on the radio about get out of debt, refinance, and it's like you're just moving debt from
Right.
credit cards or a car payment or whatever that is to your house.
Yep.
And listen, I'm not throwing stones here. I have put myself in bad financial situations in years past, and
I,
had vowed to not do that again. Right after
I think
2007.
anybody that's put themselves in that position and got out of it realizes, oh my God, I can't believe I was doing that to myself.
Yeah, yeah. Although, let's be real, if you're making a significant amount of money, like real estate agents and mortgage lenders did in 2020 and 2021, you become accustomed to a lifestyle that's pretty darn cool, right? And so when your income drops by a quarter or a half or three quarters,
Mhm.
as many of them did, it's really hard to slow down that spending. But at some point, you got to say enough's enough, and you got to stop the spending. And I'm not just talking to real estate agents or mortgage lenders. I'm talking to anybody in general out there that has credit card debt. You've got to recognize there's a problem. You have to, literally address it. I do like. I'm not a huge Dave Ramsey fan overall, but I do like his debt snowball effect, which says line up your credit cards or your debts, and in the highest balance to lowest balance, make minimum payments on everything except for the smallest balance. Put everything you can towards that until you knock it down. Then go to the next one. Go to the next one. Forget about the interest rates on them. Now, financially, it would make most sense to pay the highest interest rate first, but there is a lot of there's an emotional value of starting to see the elimination of these credit cards in people's
Yes.
mind when you have 5 credit cards. And guys, I mean, listen, I see people's credit reports every day, and it's amazing to me when you see people with 30 credit cards. Like, it's
Oh my
just
gosh.
blows your mind with literally
I have
100,000.
one personal and one business credit card. That's it.
Yeah, that's what I think most. My business coach always recommended that. I have 3 total: one business, one personal, and then kind of another personal for I've gone back between American and Delta because of flights, for
Depends
miles
on
and
who's
stuff.
got the deals on flights, right?
Yeah. So, but the real, and I've got a Costco card. I have to have that. So, anyway, but the point is, right, that's just do whatever you have to do to start eliminating that. Now, if you can't get to the point and you do have the equity in your house, you've got 2 options, right? One is, you can do an equity line. Hopefully, if you can qualify, if your credit's decent enough, right? Sometimes people that have so much debt, their credit scores drop because they're maxing all these credit cards.
Right.
And so, if you can get an equity line, you get the equity line, and don't just do this. Talk to some sort of financial advisor or mortgage lenders that will give you the advice based on your situation, because everyone's is so different. So I'm
Right.
not giving just total blanket advice here, but ultimately you want to knock out the debt if you can with an equity line. Now, remember, as you said, most equity lines are interest only. North Carolina State Employees Credit Union is not. I do not recommend North Carolina State Employees Credit Union for equity lines for that reason. Not to say that I want you to pay an interest only payment, just
Right.
gives you more flexibility when you need it.
Right.
So either way, you would then start knocking that out. So if your minimum payment's $500, pay as much as you can towards that each month. And again, you got to eliminate your spending along the way, so that you'll have more cash to throw at that. If the equity line, and we have some really unique calculators within this, some services that I have where we can literally line up your 4% mortgage, your 22% credit card debt, and look to see if it makes sense to actually do a cash out refinance. Now, it may not make sense to do that at 7%, But when we get closer to the lower sixes, in some cases, it will actually make sense to do it.
Right.
And utilize equity in your home to pay it off. But you really have to get personal here, and you've got to vow your family, really, right? The spouses, if you got a spouse, you got to get together, because it's in many cases it's one person that's the spender. Not always, but in many cases it's one person. And so, either way, you've got to have a come to Jesus meeting and determine, what's more important. Do we want to spend all this money and go into debt and frankly probably end up in divorce? Or do we want to solve this issue, get our finances taken care of, and live a much happier life down the road? So there's some sacrifice.
It's kind of like dieting,
It is
yeah,
very, I think there's a book out there waiting to be written. I think about this literally all the time because I've struggled with weight most of my life, and I've had to learn so much about finance, and struggled with that earlier in my life too. And so it's one of those things where I think it's very similar. At the end of the day, it's calories in, calories out. It's deposits and withdrawals, right?
Absolutely. Well, and it's like I told someone recently. They said, "You really need to start working out." I said, "Abs are great, but have you tried donuts?" You know what I mean? So it's kind of a catch-22, and that's the same. It's that instant gratification of spending the cash, as my mother used to call it, retail therapy.
Yeah.
And you get that, but then that item sits on the shelf. It ends up in the junk drawer. Everybody in the South has junk drawer. It ends up in the junk drawer. It ends up at the bottom of the drawer in the chest of drawers, or it ends up in the back of the closet hanging on a hook, whatever it may be, and the value is gone. And at that point, people just end up throwing it away. Well, if you buy a cool shirt for $60 and you wear it once and don't ever wear it again, and then you give it away, you just might as well have flushed three $20 bills down the toilet. And
Sure.
people don't think of it in that manner. And that's the way the financial aspects of qualification these days are. If you're trying to satisfy yourself from what your wants are versus what your needs are, that's where people make the mistake. And that's where the discipline comes in. And there's, unfortunately, that's the average person thinks that way. Oh, I got to go buy Starbucks on the way to work and spend $8 on a mocha chocolate yaya or whatever it's called, that's sugar infested, that's bad for you anyway, but I'm going to do that. Well, if you do $8 a day for 5 days a week, that's $40. Okay. Then you multiply that by 50 weeks a year. All of a sudden you're talking about $2,000 a year. And it's the same thing with me. Everybody knows my addiction to Mountain Dew, the nectar of the gods. But I don't stop at the convenience store and pick up the 20-ounce bottle for $3 now. I go to Sam's Club and I get the pallet that makes it about 35 cents a piece. Little things like that do make a huge impact if you take what you're saving and put it back. I created a game because I had to get myself to a point years ago, kind of like you were talking about. I gotten myself into some situations I shouldn't have been in. I had to figure out a way to make myself enjoy saving more than I enjoyed spending.
Yeah.
And so that balance, when I would
Kind of
log
gamify it a little bit, right?
yeah, and when you're logging into your investment account, we work with Edward Jones, so I log into my Edward Jones account, and my first competition was, okay, get it above $10,000. Then the next one was get it above 50,000. Then it was get it above 100,000. And I figured out once I had saved it took me like 7.5 years to save my first 100,000. But then it only took me 5 years to save my second one. And then the third one was only 3 years, and it compounds like that. And that's where people don't realize it, because compounded interest may be the most amazing creation ever.
Eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And people don't realize that. So and then another thing that you're talking about that a lot of people can do that I don't know that they think about, but if you are with an Edward Jones or Charles Schwab and you have investment accounts there, they have programs where you can do short-term loan borrows too for, if you need to purchase a car, but you don't have the cash right now, you put some money down on it and you pay it back over a short-term loan, like a 1 or a 2 year. You can do things like that also. You can borrow against a Roth IRA, for example, against your contributions to help pay for kids' college, stuff like that. People don't realize all of those money moves, and it's an elevated way of thinking. It's the epitome of rich dad, poor dad. You know, you are a product of the five people that you hang out with the most. How are those people influencing you? If they're going out on Friday night and Saturday night guzzling beer and taking shots to the tune of a $75 bar tab each night, that $150 a weekend adds up over 50 weeks. So, and people don't think of it in that manner.
Yeah.
What I'm doing right now, what happens if I multiply it by 50 weeks? And it's the same reason when you sit there, the same reasoning that I have to get from my eating process with my diet, because I'll be on the move and I'll just grab a Chick-fil-A today, or I'll grab an Arby's or whatever it may be, or even better, the second nectar of the gods, a milkshake from Char Grill. But you grab that, all of a sudden you're adding 800, 900 calories in 16 ounces. It's the
Yeah.
same way financially. And I
You know,
think people forget that.
there's a phenomenal book out there. I highly recommend it. It's called The Compound Effect. Uh,
Yes, great book.
and so a couple things that he talks about in that book is, when you think about your $5 coffee, is when you would think about what that $5 invested today would mean in 20 years, it's like now it's a $20 coffee.
Yes.
Is the coffee worth 20 bucks? No, it's not worth $20, right? And so I'm pretty, I still spend way too much money on things that I, like and love and want to, and fortunately I have the ability to do that, right? But at the same time, um, I could certainly make better. And I'm trying to teach my daughter, right? She wants to go to Starbucks on the way to school every morning. I'm like, no, that's not, we have cereal. Like, let's have some
Right.
cereal.
Here,
Um,
where's your water bottle?
that's right. That's exactly
Uh,
right. And
yeah, and
so
for those of you following along real quick, Darren Hardy is the author of The
that's correct.
Compound Effect. If you don't have it, you can certainly get it. I recommend, I like indie bookstores rather than buying from Amazon. So Page 158 Books in Wake Forest, North Carolina, page158books.com, PAGE158books.com. And you can call those folks over there, tell them Brian and Michael sent you. They'll be able to take good care of you. But again, that book is called The Compound Effect, and it's by Darren Hardy. He is the author. You can also look up summaries of books like that. Some people don't like to read the entire book, and so you can go to Google and type in summary of The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, and you can get like a bullet points, 2 or 3 pages. So always a
I
good
haven't
way to
done it,
summarize them.
but I imagine you could probably do that in Chat GPT as well. I've not tried it, and using Chat GPT for that.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
Brian, you asked a question earlier that I haven't yet answered, so I want to get back to that before we
Go
wrap
ahead.
up, whatever that time is. And you said, why are rates not going down? And so I talked a little bit about the Fed funds rate and so forth, but I want to get back to make sure we answer that question.
Sure.
And ultimately, it's because, right, the drop that the Fed gave us, right, a half point that they gave us originally in September, was really already built into the market at that point, because the Fed had already pre-announced that they were going. There was literally they were out in Jackson Hole, and they said the time has come. So everyone knew they were going to do that, and you could see literally interest rates have been lowering. I think we talked about this on the last one, but
Yes.
rates have been lowering since April, and
Right.
so right. I mean, last October we were in the 8% range,
Mhm.
and then we started coming back down, and then since April we literally got back. Now got down into just barely got into the sixes for a little bit for 30-year. Uh, and then the Fed dropped the rate, and everybody's very excited. And what did the market do? The bond market started selling off. Now, it started selling off because there's still very positive economic news coming in there. We had great jobs numbers. Inflation kind of settled a little bit, and then you even said it went up slightly recently. And so all these things are cause for the Fed to cool off. Now, it's all like you've seen this too. I imagine you have. I believe we were calling for a 200 basis point hike next year over time, and that's almost now been cut in half. The
Mhm.
Fed is probably they're just going to take a little bit more time
Right.
for lowering rates. I think, unfortunately, we better get really comfortable to rates in the upper sixes. I think, and lower sevens. I don't think we're going to see, like everybody predicted, mid fives by spring of next year. We would all love that to happen. I just don't see it happening given the economic environment. One of the things I think a lot of people are like, well, isn't Trump good for interest rates? And really important to talk about why the market reacted poorly last week at the moment right after he got elected. And that is because this Trump is really good for the stock market. At least people believe that Trump is good for business, and that means people take money out of something. Now, where do you take it out of? You're either going to take it out of cash that you have saved up. You're going to take it out of the places you can invest, right? You've got cash, you've got bonds, you've got stocks, real estate, I guess Bitcoin, but that's kind of like a stock.
Right.
And so that's your places for investing. And so you got to move money from one place to invest in more stocks. And to do that, a lot of these money managers that manage, millions and billions of dollars are pulling from the bond market, sticking it into stocks. Well, when you pull money out, the price drops, and therefore interest rates go up.
Right.
And so that's what's happened over the last few weeks. We did get a little bit of reprieve yesterday. Weirdly, inflation went up, but it hit expectations. It was right on the expectations.
Right.
And the bond market actually, got a little bit better, which was kind of surprising when you have inflation going up. But it's mainly because, because I think they were actually like, okay, because if we have too much good economic news, then we were worried that the Fed's not going to keep lowering interest rates. So I think that all kind of played into all that together too. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does. So, Michael, what are you seeing in terms of activity? And are you seeing after the election? I know that I've talked to a couple of real estate agents that in a couple of different groups and taught a class yesterday, and it seems that there's a little bit more activity going on right now. Are you seeing upticks in mortgage applications? And what are you expecting to see over the rest of the year as we enter the last 6 weeks of the year?
I am seeing that we're probably going to continue. Honestly, I think we're going to see more of the same for right now. I'm seeing overall, weirdly, we saw kind of a pickup the week of the election for apps, and then it kind of tailed off again. I'm talking to some of my friends that are top loan officers across the country, and I'm hearing that a lot of people are picking up. We haven't seen it here, I don't think, as much on the East Coast as maybe they've seen it on the West Coast. And a lot of times we see that kind of flow over here. But the issue, I don't know what the issue specifically is, but my friend that I was talking to yesterday, who was at a conference last week, said that she's seeing some of these other coaches, she's a coach as well, and other loan officer coaches that are producing 20, 30, 40 units a month right now.
Right.
And she is not, and she's a pretty big producer. My team had a great month last month. We had a great month this month, but we have one loan for next month. This is not it's like, what has just happened?
Right.
So we know it'll come back, but I don't know if that answers your question. But at the end of the day, I think it's just going to be a little bit more time. I think there's a great time for the buyers that are ready because the inventory's grown. There's ability to negotiate. I think there's some really good opportunities out there. The sellers are serious. Otherwise, they'd already take their houses off the market and wait to the spring.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Michael, great day. Thank you so much for your time. Give us that website one more time.
Yeah, my website's yournclender.com. And again, my podcast that's coming out, which you'll be able to search on all places you can find podcasts. Is called Beyond the Closing Table. So thank you so much, Brian. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.